But first, let's talk about what trade-off options might be good for us, okay? So you look at the fenestration U factors, right? They're 0.5, 0.3, right? They're pretty high, especially in comparison to, say, like the wall values. They're almost an order of magnitude higher than the wall values. This means that a slight trade-off or slight benefit improvement in the fenestrations can make a large difference in the walls, because there's such a huge difference in the U factors. When I'm saying, so what am I saying when I say a slight difference in the fenestration U factors? Okay, so let's talk about Energy Star. Okay, so this is some of the Energy Star information that was out there, and this is kind of their U factor requirements. Okay, so Climate Zone 3, the U factor table says I need a 0.35 fenestration and a 0.057 wall. Okay, Energy Star said I need a 0.3 fenestration. Okay, so if I use a Energy Star window in my house, I'm changing the fenestration from 0.35 to 0.3, and we'll look in our example what that does to this requirement of a 0.057 wall. Okay, so this is our example. It's a real simple 30 by 40 two-story house with 16% window area. When I say 16% window area, I'm talking 16% of the exterior walls are windows. Okay, so the total wall area, both windows and opaque walls, is 30 times 8. We'll say it's 8 feet high, times 2 because there's a front and a back, and times 2 because there's 2 stories. And similarly for the 40-foot side, right? Which gives us 2,240 square feet. Okay, and 16% of that is window, and that leaves 84% of that is opaque. So we've got a window area of about 360 feet and an opaque wall area of about 1,880 square feet. Okay, so this is the reference UA. So this is right out of the table. Okay, this basically is how much UA can I use. So we get that window area times the 3.5, which is from the table, saying, look, this is the maximum you could use, which is 125. Now I'm dropping the units because it doesn't really matter, and they're kind of ugly. And then the opaque UA, which is the opaque area, times the maximum U allowed in the table, which comes out to 107. Now you'll notice that these numbers are pretty close to each other, 125 and 107. So even though there's a lot more opaque wall, because of the difference in the U factors and in the efficiency of the thermal efficiency between the opaque and the window, makes it so that almost the same amount of energy is released between the 16% area of window and the 84% area of wall. Okay, so that comes to a total UA for my proposed home, of adding those two together, of 232. Okay, so here's my proposed home now. Okay, so that was the reference. That was using the 3.5 window. So now, if I use a 0.3 window, I multiply the window area by 0.3, and I come up with a UA of 107. Okay, I subtract 232, my total allowed UA, minus the 107, which means that I have 125 to use for the opaque area. Okay, so that's my opaque UA, and I find its new U value just by taking its UA divided by A, and that gives me its U. So 125 divided by 1880 gives me 0.0665. So in essence, I've changed that 0.057 into a 0.0665 just by going to an Energy Star window. Okay. This is the next number that I want you to remember in this presentation is this 232. Okay, that's going to be important to remember coming along. Okay, but also remember that I've changed the value to a 0.0665. Okay, so what does changing to a 0.0665 wall actually do? Okay, so here's again another table for walls saying this is the U factors for them. And if we look, what does a 0.057 wall look like? Okay, so if I have 2x6 studs with R19 insulation, I can make, and I have an R2 insulated vinyl siding, I can make that 0.057. Okay, but now I've used an improved window and I can get to 0.0665. Now what are my wall options? Okay, I can trade off and say, look, I don't need the insulated siding anymore, so I can make this without any problem. 0.063. I'm even better than that, than the 665. So just by having a little bit better windows, I no longer need insulated siding. If I have a brick veneer or something along those lines, I can even go down to R15 cavity insulation if I wanted. To show that this works, here's ResCheck. Okay, so this is putting in the information we had. So it shows the gross wall area that we calculated, the window area that we calculated, the U factor that the wall was, the window that the wall was, and it says it passes. Okay, and it says it's 0% better than code because we are trading off 1-to-1. Okay, and you can even see the compliance methodology is UA trade-off, max UA 232. There's that 232 that we calculated as our allowed UA, your UA 232. So that is ResCheck doing it. So ResCheck it allows the trade-off, but it doesn't tell you what the trade-off, it doesn't leverage the trade-off for you. It says you can do it, but you would be entering in this number and guessing and checking. Okay? Wouldn't it be nice if you had a design for code acceptance that did all those calculations for you? That's what DCA7 is. So that's the design aid that we've got. It has background on compliance paths, just like we went over in this presentation. It has U factor calculations, just like we went over in this presentation. It has U factors for various assemblies in Appendix A, which are those tables that I was showing you. And it's got them for OSB, plywood, fiberboard, studs at 16 inches on center, 24 inches on center, 2x4 studs, 2x6 studs, and cavity installations R13 through R24. Okay? And then in Appendix B, it's got that UA trade-off for fenestrations and walls for the 2012 IECC. So let's talk about Appendix A in DCA7 for a little bit. These hopefully look a little bit familiar since I've used them twice now. These are the tables that have the U factor calculations. So what you do is you say, look, what stud spacing am I at? You go in and say, I've got 16 inches on center stud. So right there at the top and right there, it says this table is for that. Okay? The one to the right is for 24 inches on center studs. And then what is my sheathing type? Both of these are wood structural panel sheathing. These two examples that I chose were wood structural panel sheathing, but there are others. Okay? And then you can say, okay, what stud size? In this case, I'm just picking 2x6. I could have gone with 2x4 just as easily. And then I say, what's my insulation? And what is my siding? I just go across. And boom, I have a U factor for that individual component. What's interesting about this is that I can actually compare with this. So if I look at the difference between the 16 inches on center and the 24 inches on center, I can look, and the difference is about 2 thousandths of a U factor. And that's pretty typical from going from 16 inches on center to 24 inches on center. Is 2/1000ths of a U factor. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the framing factor and U factor and how that works. Okay, so these are three very typical configurations in the IECC: a 2x4 with R13, a 2x4 with R13 plus 5, and a 2x6 with R20. And these are typical framing factors. So R25, our baseline, 16 inches on center. Framing factor 22 if we go to 24 inches on center, and the other ones are if we do insulated headers or raised headers or something fancy like that. So if you look, you can see that these are our baseline, our normal framing conditions. Okay, but as we reduce the framing factor, as we have more cavity and less wood path, you improve the U factor. So we improve the U factor to 5/1000ths of a U factor. So I do a lot of work and I get 5/1000ths of a U factor. So if you only need a little bit of a U factor change, then changing your framing might make sense. If you need a big change, it's probably not worth it. Okay? Look at the one with continuous insulation on it. If I look at it, it starts out pretty good and doesn't make as large of a difference. That's because the difference between the cavity path and the wood path already is slightly mitigated by this continuous insulation. So the framing factor doesn't have as much to play into it. Another thing to note is that an R13 plus 5 and a 2x6 R20 start off with the base being the same, 0.06. That's why in the IECC they are equivalent in the R value, or in the R value tables. They're either options. Okay. So moving on to Appendix B in DCA7. These are where you have that trade-off between walls and fenestration values. Okay. So this is climate zone 3 because there's a table for each climate zone, and it lists right at the top what the reference values it's assuming are. So these are pulled right out of the U factor table. So again, 0.35 for windows, 0.057 for walls, just like we did in our example. Okay. And you look at the top, see climate zone reference values. You look at the top and it says percent fenestration in total wall area. So these are that percent fenestrations. Okay. Along the side is the average U value for exterior walls, including the siding. So if you have to know the U value for your wall, which links back to Appendix A, which actually has the calculations. And then in the middle of the table is U factors for fenestrations. Okay, so this is how you can kind of read the table. So for our example, we had 16% fenestrations, right? And we were going to use a 0.3 window. So we go on down until the last time we see 0.3. And then we go over and we say, look, 0.057. So that works out the same as our calculation. We can also do the other way around. Say we know we want a certain wall type. Okay, a certain wall type, and we know that we have a certain wall type, but we want to know how good of a fenestration we need. Okay, so we have a percent fenestration area of 18%. We go down until we reach the wall we want, which is in this case 0.068, and we go across. And again, we need a 0.3 window. Okay, so you just go down and across. So it's basically the same reading, it's just going the opposite direction. And again, here's res check showing that the same thing can be done. The difference is res check, you'd have to guess and check to make sure that it works, whereas with the table, it does it for you. It shows that it works, so you don't have to figure it out. Well, we recognize that tables are annoying to read and aren't very fun. So we decided to make our own calculator, and it's still a little bit in the development process. We've got it. We're going to make it for iOS, Android, and Silverlight. And the iOS and Android, they're still they're being updated and getting ready for the third-party process because that takes a little bit longer. But the Silverlight, or the PC version of it, is going to be free, and it's going to be posted on our website really soon. So if you go to our website, awc.org, there's this calculators button right here, and you just click on that, and it has several calculators, some of which are really handy, like the connections calculator and the span calculator and things like that. But among them will be this energy DCA7 calculator. Okay, and we've got it finished. We just need to put it up on the web now. So this comes to the next polling question. How familiar are you with AWC's website?
All right, so have you never been there? Have you never been to our website? You've only gone there for education. You're familiar with publications and calculators, or maybe it's your home page. So go ahead and tell us how familiar you are with our web page. So.
And while I really hope it's your homepage,
awesome. We actually have a couple people that say it's their homepage.
That'd be great. It's not even my homepage, so.
That is awesome. I am thrilled to see that. All right. Just a couple more seconds. And I'm going to go ahead and close. And share. All right, so the majority of you are familiar with publications and calculators. That's probably to be expected. And then 39% go for education. That's again probably to be expected. 5% of you have never been to our website. Please go check us out. And 3%, it's your homepage. That is awesome. Awesome, awesome.
There's lots of great stuff at AWC's website. We have a whole bunch of things, especially for code officials. There's a code connections area that is to keep you up to date with what's going on in our industry, and you can become a design professional member as well at our website. It has lots of great things on there, so I recommend everyone checking it out. So here's the example of the calculator itself. This is the PC version, because it's free and easy to use and everything. So I'll just show you kind of the buttons and things that go along with it. So first off, you pick your climate zone, just what you would expect. And I'm using a green box here because that's a required input. Okay, you have to have a climate zone, otherwise it doesn't know where you're even talking about. Then it will populate the required U value and required fenestration. Basically, what it's talking about is the U factors from the table. Okay, and you can modify these if you want to. You don't have to, and I recommend not unless you know what you're doing. But if you have, say, a state-specific value, like if you're in North Carolina or someplace that has a state-specific value that they've altered the IECC, they've amended it, then you can insert those. It'll give you a warning saying, look, this isn't what the generic IECC says, but you can proceed to go on with that. Okay. The next is the percent fenestrations, because if you're doing that trade-off, that needs to know how much is that trade-off going to be. Okay. Sheathing materials. This is just basically to limit how many options it actually shows over here on the right-hand screen. You can click on any of those and go back and forth between them, but we found that it was a little overwhelming if we showed all of them, so we kind of limited it down. This is the direction the calculation is going. If you need the wall, for example, then that means you know what your fenestration is, and you need to know what the wall value is. If you click on fenestrations, that means you know what wall you have, but you need to know what fenestration value would allow you to use that wall. Okay? So it's basically which direction in the calculation you're going. This right here is the actual, and it depends on what button you are picking, fenestration or wall value. So it's where you put in, I'm going to use this value for either my fenestration or my wall, and I want you to determine the other one. Okay? And this is the output. So this says, in this case, this was our example, a climate zone 3, I'm using a 0.3 window, and I need a wall of 0.0665. Okay? And then it gives you right here on the calculator, look, I can use 2x4s, 2x6, and it gives you what insulation values I need. Now you'll notice that some of these cells are highlighted in red. That's because a typical bat is not made for that level of, or that deep of a stud. It's hard to find an R27 bat to fit in a 2x4, for example. So it's warning you, saying, look, the user is kind of responsible to figure out if this makes sense or is reasonable for that type of thing. Okay, and these are performance value R values. So if it says R20, that means it needs an R20 after compression to be in that value, or to be in that cavity. So like this R19, I can't just stick in any old value and say, well, it might need an R20 that's compressed to make the R19 value. Okay. So this is going the other direction now. Okay, showing the other direction. So I clicked on fenestrations. And remember, I wanted to use a 0.068 wall, and again, it's showing the 0.3 fenestration value. What's cool about this is I picked what wall U factor I wanted, right? I said I want a 0.068 wall, and now it's giving me options of what can make that 0.068 wall. So it's a sneaky way of saying, how do I get a wall with a certain U factor? Okay. So that's one of the tricks that I like about it. So this is the future plans and desires for the calculator. So we're not done with it. We're still working on it, and we're hoping to get more stuff into it if we have time and things to do and ability to do it. Currently, the calculator is limited to the 2012 IECC. We recognize that the 2015 is out there, and in a lot of ways we like it better because it's a lot easier to use. So we'd like to make it so that the calculator is also has the 2015 IECC reference values. Currently, you can use the 2015 values, but you have to insert them. Whereas when I was talking about that state-specific, you'd have to just insert them in that. Okay. State-specific reference values is along the same lines. So instead of having to insert them manually, you just drop down box and pick your county or whatever it would be, and it would populate your climate zone and your state values. That would be a really nice feature if we can eventually get it. Okay. The U factor calculator is another part that we would like to do. So instead of having a table that says these are your components that make up a U factor, we would like it so that you could say, I want to make a wall basically from scratch, and say, I'm going to use 2x4 studs, and I'm going to add this, and I'm going to add this, and I'm going to add this, and it, as you go, creates the U factor. So you can come up with what is needed, or you can create your own instead of limited to what's in the tables. And lastly, a stretch goal would be to add moisture criteria. The Canadian Wood Council currently has a database of walls that are approved or work well in their climate zones. And that would be really nice to have criteria that says this is a wall that will work well in your climate zone or in your area. That would be really nice if we could add that feature to it, so it's not just energy but also a moisture issue. Okay.